All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see all of you virtually. I'm sorry we're not in Hodgson Hall like we normally are, but we're really thrilled to offer this program online. I'm Pete Jutras. I'm the director of the Hugh Hodgson School of Music, and we're so happy to welcome back all our students to this first week of classes and get everybody back making some music in the building. Common Hour is kind of a special time for us, I think. It's when we can come together as a family and share ideas and performances and inspiration and ask questions. And, there are a lot of disappointments about this kind of COVID season of academia. But one of the bright spots is we're able to engage a lot of guests virtually. Without having to travel and figure out schedules and things like that, we can have some fantastic people come and present for us. And so we are starting things off with a bang. It's kind of but wait, there's more. We get not just one great guest, but two great guests today. So we're thrilled to welcome Fred Child. Many of you know him as the host of American Public Media's Performance Today, the most listened to classical music program in America. He has a long and distinguished career of presenting music to people and connecting with audiences. And I just appreciate that the first sentence of his bio mentions Italian cheese and baseball. I think that tells you everything you need to know that this is someone you want to pay attention to. And joining us with Fred today, we also have the very distinguished composer Wang Jie. And she has had quite a career with pieces featured at the New York City Opera's Vox Festival and the Minnesota Orchestra, Detroit Symphony, Buffalo Philharmonic. And so we're really thrilled to have both Fred and Wang Jie here today. And you're not here to hear me talk, so I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and we'll get the program started.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Pete. I'm Mark
Thanks,
Mobley.
Pete.
I'm director of the Arts, Career, and Entrepreneurship space at the University of Georgia. And I'm thrilled to meet Wang Jie today and thrilled to re-meet Fred Child, with whom I worked at Performance Today many years ago. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. Thanks, Mark. How are you?
Doing very well. Athens, Georgia is a lovely place to be. So tell me a little bit about your life in quarantine now. I understand that you're at home. Well, G is actually in your house. You're somewhere else. So how does all this work?
Yeah, and I'm not sure this has been mentioned yet. G and I are married.
Oh, sorry.
And the whole story about that too, and how a radio host and a composer got together. But yes, G and I are married, live in New York City. G is literally in our apartment right now. Of course, these days, a lot of folks are working from home, and that includes me and G. And back in March, when everything shut down and everything, and everybody was told to work from home, it quickly became apparent that our cozy, lovely New York apartment was not big enough for two people to work in at the same time. And especially, I mean, there's G in her studio. You can see the piano right behind her. She's a composer. Making sound is part of the deal. And when I'm recording a daily national radio show with this very microphone, I needed to be quiet. So for a couple of weeks, I was asking G to be quiet. And after a while, wait, this doesn't work. And I'm very lucky. I'm sitting in a different apartment in our same building in New York. Some of our neighbors have left New York City. I'm up in a different, a small studio apartment that I very fortunately have access to. I'm looking out at the Hudson River just over my left shoulder. I'm 5 floors up from my home down on the first floor where she is. So we're each working kind of from home, but yeah, not in the same room, so that we can each do our work. G, what's your experience been of this?
I thought, okay, I'll draw the line at not being able to flush the toilet while you're recording. I mean, that was really what did it for me. Not being able to use the piano, it was a minor inconvenience. I do most of my sketching and composition. Normally I have a pretty good idea after the initial pre-composition work, and I only check with the piano occasionally. So a lot of the times for the 2 hour window, Fred was recording in the bedroom down there under a blanket. Actually, it was a towel. It was like a bath towel or something over his head, and our door still had a big crack on it. It's a pre-war building, so it's very old. So actually, even when I walk in the hallway past the door, and when the floor makes this uh Fred makes this squeak sound, it actually means that he has to re-record whatever he was doing.
Right.
So yeah, so it's very fortunate that we have neighbors who are this generous to let Fred record somewhere else, and and the neighbor even put out a sign on the 6th floor between 10:30, was it 10:30, Fred? 10 to noon or something is quiet hour, quiet on that floor.
Yeah, 10 to noon 30. Yeah. And the neighbors
Right.
are so respectful, and they're like, "Did you have a good show today?" I see them in front of the elevator. And yeah, I performance today is broadcast on about 280 stations around the country, including WUGA there in Athens. 2 hours a day of, I mean, for most of the history of the show, it's been music in concert. And that's been performance today. What's today's concert scene? And we broadcast lots and lots of material from Hodgson Hall. Wonderful recording engineers, an incredible concert series there at Hodgson Hall. So Hodgson Hall, Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, Disney Hall out in LA, concert halls large and small all across the country and around the world. That's the core of the show. Now, of course, that pardon me, that programming is changing because the concert scene is not happening in most places, and that's something we can talk about too. But we're still doing 2 hour daily shows with me recording from home in the morning, and Jie working from home doing her stuff. I'm going to get some water.
So, G, what is the COVID lockdown meant for you and your career? What changes have you experienced over the course of the last 6 months?
You know, logistically speaking, I'm in the same boat with most composers, and you know, most all of my performances has been either canceled or postponed, and then my current active commissions also are postponed. And I think what's really fortunate for me is that I have been getting phone calls, personal phone calls from these music organizations who commissioned to work with me, and they all, before their announcement that their season's postponed and all of the media, they made a point of calling me in person to tell me first. So I really appreciated that. The Colorado Music Festival, Joanne Filetta, Joanne actually, you know, Joanne and I talk regularly about the piece that I've been working on for their season opening concert. Was originally scheduled for 2 weeks from today.
Right.
Right. And so now it's gonna be the next season, the season opening for the next season. And so it also changed, and because of the pandemic experience, and because I am not working that differently, because composing work is so much of solitude, and being alone, and just being with as little distraction of the outside noise as possible. However, the immense suffering of the people out there, that is not being, I cannot shut that out. And that's a very serious emotional antenna that has been informing my work as well. So I definitely noticed there's something a little more daring in my writing since the pandemic, and it's almost like, oh, this is unprecedented time. This is a time to try anything, and to be daring, and to take the kind of risks that before this I would, probably not do. There's that, and then there's not being able to hang out with, and see my musician friends play and concert, that's really hard too. On top of knowing how much suffering is out there and knowing that these musicians whom I care about a great deal, who has invested in the past so much work into collaborating with me, interpreting my music, and all of them are suffering so much from the lack of work and from just the confusion of how did we get to this
Yeah.
in this country, you know. So yeah, so it's changes, and it's rapid, and it's kind of acute changes in every aspect. Even the way I walk is different. So that's what's on top of my mind.
So you mentioned the piece for Joanne Falletta and the Buffalo Philharmonic. Can you tell me a little more about it and who it involves?
So it's a season opener for the Buffalo Philharmonic Orchestra. And so right now it's titled The Winter That United Us. And originally I designed the piece because I love their Kleinhans Hall, where I heard some of my most favorite and treasured repertoire in that, and that hall is really like magnificent. It's one of my favorite halls in the world. So I wanted to, after Joanne and I worked together presenting my first symphony, I noticed all these acoustic properties. So I dug into their archive, and I was going to, the original plan was that the music will kind of echo the architectural feature of their hall. So right now, I'm not abandoning that plan. I think I can have my cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
But the spirit of this piece is going to take on a extra layer of tone. And that tone is going to be a lot more serious, because we will have lived through, maybe, we don't know what a year from now is going to be. We will have lived through unimaginable difficulties. And everyone, music audiences, musicians, Joanne herself,
Sure.
everybody I know are having experiences that they've never had before. And I wanted to at least be open to what that means in the composition,
Right.
in music.
Yes. Well, one of the things you two are really good at, and I want to talk about it at some point, is social media. And you have published on social media, what's it called? The 10-bar challenge?
I did.
What is that?
So at the beginning, New York City was like the epicenter. It was very scary. I literally, I know somebody, and one of my colleagues, composer, also someone I'm very fond of, and shares an office with me, and she was really struggling with COVID-19. So, but then one day I heard that she said she was out of the woods, and I heard her voice, and I was so relieved. And I was like, that was a really good composing day for me. And it was mysterious. Why? Like just kind of my spirit just lifted in ways that it was very strange too. That I would be feeling so good that day in my work. So ever since that, I've made a rule for myself. So every time I hear about someone, and then it actually continued to happen. I had a student who recovered, and then I know several friends who recovered. Those recovered from COVID-19. Every time I hear about a recovery from a friend or a colleague or a student, I make sure that I write 10 extra bars, 10 extra measures of music that day. In addition to the work that I'm already slated to, to do. So that's the 10 extra bar rule.
Nice. So the joy of recovery helps push the music forward.
I think energy is energy. If I put in the energy, if I do something, an action, even if it's not being felt immediately, I would like to believe that it makes a small difference in the universe of energies, and these celebratory energy recovery is so amazing. We need so much recovery, not just the illness, not just the disease recovery, but our spirits and our culture, our art form, our field, recovery in every aspect that I can think of in our field. And I love our field, and I want to know that every little recovery in whatever form, I acknowledge it in some small doing.
Nice. So Fred, how has COVID affected PT? Have you had to program toward it or account for it, or is it the closed concert halls having the effect on the program? Is that what's affecting the program most?
Yeah, I would say in every level you can think of, we've been affected. First of all, every member of our staff is working from home, whereas for 30 plus years, the show has been produced from radio studios. First of all, in Washington, D.C., the show was founded by NPR in Washington, D.C., and Mark, you and I were colleagues there at the NPR bureau in Washington, D.C. Then in 2007, the show changed networks, moved to American Public Media in St. Paul, Minnesota. 4 years ago, Xi and I got married, and APM has a studio in New York. So I've been going to the studio in New York. My colleagues are at the studio in St. Paul. Well, now every single member of the production team is at home. This was unprecedented. Nobody ever thought about a contingency like this. And the tech team had to think very quickly about what that means. How do we do a 2-hour daily national radio show with the host at home in New York, with the technical team 1,000 miles away at their homes in Minnesota, the production team at their homes in Minnesota? So we've had to build from scratch with no notice whatsoever a completely new production model. How do we audition music? How do we choose music? How do we do interviews? How do we do audio editing? How do we record my voice tracks? How do we edit my voice tracks if that needs to happen? How does my voice and the music get all put together? How does it get sent to stations? All these things that we've taken for granted as part of the infrastructure of the show are now have to be built from the ground up. So there's that part of it, just the pure logistics of it. And then there's the programming. Basically, in over the course of just a few days, in the middle of March, we went from having a busy, vibrant, creative concert scene from coast to coast in the big concert halls I mentioned earlier, but also in small towns all across the country. And that's the stuff that has always been the core of the program, of Performance Today. Suddenly it doesn't exist anymore. Now we've got a library of those that we can draw from, and I'm still broadcasting concerts that took place at Hodgson Hall and at Disney Hall and at Benaroya Hall in Seattle and every place else. We're still playing some of those. And now we're starting to say, well, here's something, the Grand Teton Music Festival, like every festival in the country, didn't have in-person concerts. But this week, conductor Donald Runnacles and a few friends gathered on stage with nobody in the hall. And here's a little Schumann trio that they recorded a couple of weeks ago in the empty hall. They distributed it on YouTube, on their YouTube channel, on their social media. And this is what performance is today. This is today's reality of how performance is happening. So we're beginning to broadcast some of those. And we're telling our friends at festivals to send in, because a lot of them have written to us and said, oh, we're not doing concerts. Does that mean we can't send you anything? No, of course it doesn't. The name of the show is, we still want to live up to that. Performance Today, we assumed that would always mean concerts, but now it doesn't. And what is the state of performance today? So I'm telling those stories. What are musicians doing? What are composers doing? What are venues and presenters doing? I mean, we still have yet to see the full weight of this, but this is catastrophic for many performing arts organizations who are always on the knife's edge anyway in terms of budgets. And So half of one season is gone. The summer's gone for festivals. Now we're looking at this fall, the winter, possibly next spring. A lot of organizations were able to get through part of a season or part of a summer. What will the full effect of this be? I mean, that's a story that I have to be able to tell, first of all. Also to showcase some of the creative ways people are now reaching audiences and connecting with audiences. Jie, you were just talking about this, that part of what you've lost is that networking, meeting people. That's so vitally important to the music business. Getting together, not just for rehearsals, but to hang out afterwards and have a meal and talk about ideas. And wouldn't it be fun if we did this? Of course, we miss gathering in person for the events themselves, but there's all that brainstorming time and space too. And all of that has been pulled apart. And even so, there are folks doing really creative things with social media and online platforms, and now starting to go into outdoor spaces, and now even back into some indoor spaces with appropriate health protocols. So as those stories are evolving, those are the stories I'm telling. As performance, the nature of performance is evolving, those performances themselves, the music performances themselves are evolving on the show too. So great question, Mark. And basically every single thing is changing. The programming, the stories I tell, and the logistics behind getting it all on the air. It has all changed in the last 5 months.
Well, I'm so happy you mentioned storytelling, because I think of performance today in part as an educational service for people to learn more about classical music. And so I think of you as an educator that way. I know G teaches at Brooklyn College, but the two of you have actually been teaching at colleges, have been visiting in sessions like this. Curtis, where else?
The Curtis Institute we've done it 3 or 4 times at Curtis, but at festivals too. Did it for the Colorado Festival out in Boulder, Colorado. Where else have we done our seminar? I mean, G, you're teaching all the time anyway, and you've done a lot of prison work, but where else? I don't know. We've done these seminars for emerging artists, a lot of different places.
Yeah, long list, long list, and that's it. I love doing that,
Yeah.
especially like right now, I feel like fish in the water. This
Right.
is something I very very much enjoy doing. Yes.
So what do each of you tell emerging artists? I mean, you have a bunch of emerging artists on the line right now. What outreach do you do, and what message do you give? G?
Wow. So, actually, I thought about it earlier today, and today, my feeling is that, especially when my own students and colleges are all starting up for the fall semester, I was just really compelled to say that I could not imagine being in my 20s already, or in my late teens, already very confused, but belly full of fire, so much hope, right, for the life ahead of me. And then to be told that this is a unprecedented mess that I'm about to walk into. And I would have felt very scared. The uncertainty of this world, which for a lot of freshmen, this is their very first college experience. And I just have so much compassion and of the difficulties that they're about to experience, which is colored by the experiences of us faculty members. This is also new for us.
Right.
And so, but then I also see this as an opportunity, because this incoming class is very special in terms of this is probably the university experience. They're going to be, looking back some 20 years from now, and they're going to be like, hey, listen, when I first went to college, COVID-19, you heard about this? And because this is such a unknown territory. And I think for the exploratory spirits, I'd like to think I'm one of them. I want to explore what that togetherness means, especially in higher education. When a lot of classes are happening online, music classes is what I focus on, and it's very interactive. I am very much dependent on reading the room and having students interact, music making, and brainstorming. So my classroom energy has always, before COVID, has always been very lively and very interactive. And the technology for me is the biggest challenge, and I think for the music students as well is going to be the biggest challenge. So far, I'm not aware of a platform that is universally applied in the teaching system where there's no delay at all in the audio transmission. So so that's what's been on my mind all day today. And I think the advice, if I'm able to give any, because this is so new for me too, is that we have to be extra sensitive as students, as colleagues, to each other, extra sensitive to other people's difficulties. And because we're all just taking online courses and staying in our own rooms, and not everybody is going to classrooms, it's especially important to be sensitive to everybody else's difficulties that are different from yours, and be extra courteous and be extra respectful. So that's sort of the classroom dynamic that I'm cultivating in my teaching. As for composers, what I want to say is that this is also a great opportunity to explore solo works, writing for solo instrumentation. Just focus and take this opportunity to focus on what can be done to the most effective of your learning. And I can vouch for that. The entire summer session at the Curtis Institute, this was our focus. And most composers, they walked away with a project that they can live with for the rest of their career. And so this is not a easy task to do, to write for solo instruments. So this would be a really good time to foster these connections, these personal connections with your friend who is the flutist, let's say, in the music school, and just say, can you, I will buy you virtual coffee or whatever. Can you show me how your instrument works? Can you show me what's the most exciting repertoire that you're learning this semester? And collaborate one-on-one, and self-organize. And this is actually so exciting that you guys get to experience, because normally this type of thing don't happen until like the second year, and then you're like, oh, all warmed up in the school environment, and then you start looking for someone to play your music, and then blah blah blah. But now it's like you can start today. Who's a pianist I can talk to?
Right. Nice. And so, Fred, in these presentations, what do you talk about? You do a lot of marketing and PR advice?
Kind of, it's really about, I mean, you picked up on this word earlier, Mark, storytelling. Musicians coming into the world, composers, performers, singers, conductors, whatever role you have, it's about doing the work itself, of course. But then there's also the question of how do you get the word out about yourself and the work that you do? And in a local, even more so in a national or global media environment, it can feel overwhelming, and it can feel like that storytelling is out of my control. And in fact, there's a lot that individual musicians have, a lot of control that individual musicians have about the narrative about themselves and their work out in the world. And in the seminars that Xi and I do, she does a great extended seminar with composers, and I do an extended seminar on dealing with media, but it's really about storytelling, and it's about storytelling about yourself. And the fundamental part of this, the beginning of doing this work, is writing a bio. And there's, in the classical music world, there has come to be a kind of standard template bio, which is perfectly serviceable in terms of getting information out, but it tends not to have any storytelling. And I don't think people really understand the power of telling a story about yourself. There's this idea that, well, a much larger conversation for another time about the kind of stultified environment that classical music tends to create for itself.
Right.
And one of the many reflections of that, one of the many expressions of that is in bios, which tend to have formalized language and a list of collaborators and accomplishments. And I am actually going to, Mark, I didn't ask you if this was okay. Is it okay if I do a quick screen share?
Sure.
Okay. Oh, host, I'm not allowed to screen share is a message I'm getting. And maybe it's not possible. I could just
there you go. You're now a co-host.
Okay. Let me make sure okay. Yes. Here's Jonathan Biss, pianist Jonathan Biss. This is a pianist who has a major label recording contract. He teaches at Curtis. He's one of the co-directors of the Marlborough Festival in Vermont, a major player by any standard in the classical music world. This is his official bio. Jonathan Biss was born in 1980. His professional debut preceded this event by several months when he performed prenatally the Mozart A Major Violin Concerto at Carnegie Hall with the Cleveland Orchestra. And then, you see this? There's a little footnote. Who puts a footnote in a bio? Scroll down, and here's the footnote. The New York Star Bulletin observed, while visibly pregnant, violinist Miriam Fried was extremely persuasive and the more obviously great story. So, and you know, but before I move on, let me just, I'll share one more bio that I love. Just happens to be my fellow panelist here. Okay, it's wangjiemusic.com, and let's go to the About page. You'll notice there are two different bios. This one says standard bio, but even this doesn't start with a list of accomplishments. At the forefront of the younger generation of American composers, Wang Jie has emerged as one of the most evocative musical voices. So that's the standard bio, but what's her official bio? Part cartoon character, part virtuoso, musical whiz kid, Wang Jie has been nudging serious music and its concert audiences into spectacular frontiers over the past few seasons. Skipping down, despite having the worst title in the history of music, Oboe Concerto for the Genuine Heart of Sadness, channeled the power of the League of Composers Orchestra into an orgiastic whirlwind. All right, this is not standard classical music bio language, but it's eye-catching and ear-catching, and you already get a sense of who this person is. With Jonathan Biss, it's a story nobody else could tell. It's only about him. And with Wang Jie, it's stuff that nobody else could say. It's only about her, and it already gives you a sense of who she is. So write a bio. Don't give me a list of your collaborators, at least not up front. Take some time. Think about who you are in this world. What are your stories? What are your true stories about how you came to be you? What are the stories that are only about you that distinguish you from everybody else. And this can include not just triumphs, which everybody wants to pile into a bio, but obstacles and setbacks. One of the more compelling stories I've told recently on the air was a world famous pianist came to me. Well, I can say her name because she came on the air. Simona Dinnerstein came on the air, and we got talking about this and that. And she wound up telling me, this was not planned, but she wound up telling me about being in the middle of playing a concerto, having a memory slip, forgetting where she was, getting so lost she had to stop. The orchestra stopped. It was horribly embarrassing. Meanwhile, her publicist is back there saying, "What are you doing? Why are you telling this story? Nobody's supposed to ever know this." She told me the story and she said, "It made me change the way I learn pieces of music. It made me change the way I practice. Now I learn pieces not just front to back, but back to front. So I know every transition from every direction." And as a fellow human, it didn't diminish her in my eyes. It humanized her to me. So the triumphs, yes, share those. The funny stories, like Jonathan's story, yes. The obstacles and the setbacks, too. These are part of who you are. It's part of what makes you the artist you are. What are the stories, the truths, the hardships, and the triumphs that are yours and yours alone? Put those in your bio. There are other places you can give me a list of your collaborators and the people you've written works for and the stages you've been on and the plans that you have and the projects you're working on. Those are important too. But tell me a story about yourself. That's what captures my attention. If I'm a listener sitting in the concert hall reading the program note, that's what captures my attention. If I'm a media professional, which at the moment I happen to be, I'm the host of a national radio show on public radio, that's what captures my attention. If I start to read a bio and it's just a list, it doesn't tell me anything about this person. Not really. It doesn't tell me who that artist is.
Right.
So tell me a story about yourself. Take some time, and of course, practice, practice, practice. Do the work. Work with your collaborators at school, work with your professors. You're so lucky to have Mark here. I mean, Mark and I worked together 15, 20 years ago. I learned so much about music from Mark. Take advantage of his knowledge and expertise and perspective. Ask him questions, knock on his door, call him up, bug the heck out of him. He's an incredible resource. All the people around you are incredible resources. Of course, do all that work as part of being a student at UGA. And take some time to think about who you are and put it in your bio. And that will help get the word out to the world.
Perfect. Thank you. I think we're going to open up to questions. So, Emily, you got somebody?
Yes, I do. David's going to ask a question, so I'm going to promote him now.
Hi, David.
Comment about some work that had occurred as a part of a prison outreach, or it was sort of in the middle of another description. But last fall, the wind ensemble here went on a prison tour, and so I was interested in hearing a little bit more about that.
Oh, so what I heard was, David, you're interested in the prison work I've done in the past. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this was well, the beginning of it is really seeing that NYU, where I was doing my PhD at the time, that they had a prison education program that was funded directly through Governor Cuomo, and so that kind of sparked an artistic idea, like how can I teach music when all of the usual teaching, supplies like a piano or a board or whatever. I mean, they probably like can't even bring a pencil in. Like, what if all of that is removed? What kind of music making, what kind of music education can I imagine? So that was kind of an interesting artistic problem at first. And then, so NYU decided against the music courses for that period of time. So I pursued a grant, and the grant was from McKnight Foundation in Minneapolis, from American Composers Forum. Composers, if you're not members yet, join immediately after this talk. And then, and to my surprise, I got it. And it was in a women's prison. And what came out of it is that a concert opera. I had the training and what it requires to be in a room with inmates without a guard present. So they had the opportunity to just share who they were with me as humans and not as prisoners. So I did maybe a week or two of educational workshops for prisoners. And through my interaction and also my librettist, the playwright Zhu Zoe, and she and I, we went in together and we did all the workshops. And from the interaction, again, it sparked an artistic idea that what makes them human, and we wrote an opera based on the inspiration, that spark, the artistic spark that came after our interaction with them. So that's my very first, and then I had a collaborator, Holly Mulcahy, who at the time was the concertmaster of the Chattanooga Symphony, and she had her own prison initiative, and we also collaborated in a prison in Georgia, actually, the Walker State. So she commissioned me to write a piece for her based on our interaction. I returned several times, and several inmates have created artworks based on their listening experience of Holly's performance and my music. So this was kind of a dialogue on the artistic front, purely artistic front. So this is an ongoing project with Holly, and the prison opera, the research opera that I wrote based on my experience in the Minnesota prison, a women's prison, is on YouTube. The title is called "Arraigned on Shakopee." Shakopee is the name of the prison. So that's the framework of my prison work. And then there's of course a lot of stories, and it changed me, changed my perspective as an artist and as a citizen in this country.
Nice. Emily, we have another question.
Yes, here's a question from Kenya. Kenya is asking, is there advice you can give or advice you can share to get one out of a creative block while composing?
Yes, a ton. That's my full-time job with my students. A creative block, well, congratulations. You are in good company, because all great composers and writers, this is their business number one, is, hey, here's a moment, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know that I can go on, and blah, 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 all of that. Self-doubt and suffering, that's all real. And there's no bad news, but it sounds really bad. It's not going to get better. It's just going to be different. And different challenges, different blocks, different challenges are going to present themselves in your artistic work throughout your life. And but that's the opportunity to get to know yourself. And the quickest advice, the most pragmatic advice I can tell you is, I'll show you actually, is this thing. This is the secret weapon of all creative, composers and writers especially. This is a 30-minute timer, and when it do this, you do nothing but composing. You do nothing but write notes down. and you don't toss anything you write during this time, and just let it happen. Just make it happen. Even if it's not going to be your masterpiece, even if you're not going to be able to live with what you write in that moment, just write. Put in the mileage. Give yourself, say, 4 rounds of this every day. Do it first thing in the morning. Do it when you are not going to be distracted by the noise of this world. Just put one foot in front of another. Put in the time. Show up. Get the mileage in. That's what anybody could do in times of creative challenges, difficult times in the creative process. And I still experience that too, in different shades and colors. So, all right. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah. We'd love some more questions. So I have one for G. Listening to your music, I hear like the First Symphony and some other works, occasional flecks of Debussy and Stravinsky.
Thank you. I'm honored that I mean these two were as good as they come. So thank you for putting speak my name in the same sentence with these two. So no, I really mean it. I really mean it. I not that I aimed for that, but I love it when and thank you for spending time with my music. And I find it personally, as an artist, it's very important for me to honor the composers I love. This is not to say that I copy them in any way that I'm conscious of, but it also means that I am standing on their shoulders, and it's a practice of almost humility. Is that there's so much beyond the surface of their music that can I hear it? Can I really hear the music under the notes? And so that has been something in my work that I've been conscious of. I've had the rebellious period, and I think every composer must give yourself the opportunity and the ample time to experience what it's like to rebel, and then to read what Morton Feldman says. To rebel against history is still being part of history. And then you can rebel some more, and then you're like, I rebel Morton Feldman, and then you rebel some more, and then at some point someone you fall in love with, and who happens to be this violinist or violist or trombone player, whatever, and then you're like, oh my god, I just want to write something that you enjoy playing. And then they're gonna tell you, well, here are the pieces I enjoy playing. Okay, and these are what idiomatic for my instrument. And then you listen to these pieces, and it becomes part of you. They become part of you, and you don't eat a piece of bread and grow like a piece of bread out of your arm. No, it doesn't work like that. But you do have to know the repertoire. So, Mark, thank you for your deep listening. And Stravinsky, Debussy, these are two big influences of my artistic spirit, and I don't think I've even scratched the surface of what these two have achieved artistically, and this leads to a problem that I actually noticed over 20 years of being inside the composition music schools, is that the amount of repertoire composers have been required to study and deep study has decreased over the years. So this is just a cautionary. This is a cautionary for composers in today's meeting, is that pay attention. Really study the repertoire. You don't have to like it. You don't have to like what you hear. And they don't have to be appealing to you at all. But you must know that they existed and that they were important for the repertoire, for the history that you're part of. Only then can you say, I might have something to add. There is no composer who can survive, with very few exceptions, who can survive in isolation from the history of our art form, the repertoire, the body of our art form. So that's what I have to say about my influences. Mark, thank you.
You're so welcome.
A great lead.
Yeah, sure. We have some more questions. Emily?
Yes, I invited Cindy and she's
Great.
coming on. And we have one more question after that. So
Cynthia has been a guest on PT. Cindy, how are you?
I went and tried to find some glasses that look like Google Glass, but I can't.
For people who don't know, Cindy was one of the beta testers of Google Glass when that was being tried out. What was that? 3 years ago?
7 years ago. 7
Oh my
years
God,
ago.
7 years ago. So yeah, so you came on to talk about application of Google Glass in the world of music and in your work and the work you do, and it was fascinating. And then Google Glass went away.
Exactly. Well, it hasn't entirely gone away. There's some applications now in EMS, emergency medical services, and with autistic children, they're using it. So we'll see. I think that they let the cat out of the bag when they told me they actually already had the contact lens. And so it's actually Google Glass embedded in the eye. But anyway, that's a whole other, little
The Matrix.
Yeah, exactly. I first of all, thank you, G and Fred, for being here. It's really wonderful. Thank you for taking the time, and so inspirational for all of us. You mentioned something about performance today and how we've sort of had to widen or change our lens about what performance today means. And I find that so fascinating. I'm curious if you would speak a little bit more, both of you, on what can performances look like when there aren't concerts as we've normally seen and been a part of, and are there different ways that we can think about our audiences?
Now, this is the $1 million question of 2020 in the world of the arts. And I have yet to think of or yet to see the new application that feels like, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the answer. I've seen a lot of experiments, some of which have worked or not worked in all kinds of different ways. I really liked something that was I liked the idea of something that was a collaboration between WQXR and Lincoln Center just a couple of weeks ago. They sent musicians out to a lot of different outdoor spaces in New York City, spaces that mean a lot to them personally. Like Anthony McGill, the principal clarinetist of the New York Philharmonic, went to a park near his home in the Bronx. And it's a place that was near and dear to him. So he had stories to tell about the place. There were people wandering by at an appropriate distance. And he was set up and well mic'd to play a little solo clarinet. So it worked for people who were there, who happened to see it. It worked for people who saw it on Facebook Live and Instagram Live. It worked for people who then saw it after the fact as it was reposted and reposted and reposted. So it was a way of reaching a lot of people who would never take it upon themselves to go see the New York Philharmonic, for one thing. Mm-hmm. This is something that the classical music world in particular has always struggled with. How do we reach those other people who might have an interest in what we're doing if only they ever heard it? So that was an interesting experiment for me. I can't help but note that our colleagues in this business in Europe are back relatively quickly to being in the concert hall and started off by using their concert spaces for these kinds of things too, and limited audience and spread out audience. And now some American institutions are beginning to do that. Here in the States, we are behind the curve on dealing with the pandemic in the first place. So in Europe, they're a little quicker to get back to using their available spaces. The interactive live performances from a distance have been problematic. Everybody's discovering the meaning of buffering. And trying to play live when two people are on Zoom in two different places just doesn't work. And now there are some technologies that are allowing the buffering to get down short enough where people can literally play together when they're not physically together, and start to share some of those. That and especially when those start to be a little more in wider usage and distribution, that's potentially a game changer. Because then we can start to have string quartets with each member playing from their home and doing it live on social media or on a website, paid or not. That's another whole question. Early on in March and April, a lot of organizations were doing events for free and then discovering, oh, we just can't afford to keep doing this. And then they start charging $10. And instead of getting 100,000 people coming to watch, they get 500 people coming to watch. And we haven't figured out that side of it either. And ultimately, I'm finding now 5 months in that I miss breathing the same air that the musicians are breathing, being in the same space, having fellow audience members around me, hearing the same thing, and then going out in the lobby and talking about it. As much as I want to find the great applications and online uses, for me, there's no substitute for that in-person shared public event. And Jie, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about this too.
My thoughts are very much in line with yours, Fred. It's not the same. And one of the reasons that it's not the same, it will never be the same, is because our repertoire, the core of our discipline, is the idea of public presentation of this sound art form. And this is how all the compositions, almost all the compositions, with the exception of maybe the brand of the Goldberg variation, which was supposed to put the prince to sleep, with very few exceptions, majority, I would say, more than 99% of our core repertoire is designed for large public consumption in a very specific production model. And there are halls, instruments, the entire history of the rise and the evolution of our instruments and our concert halls, our venues, our artistic presenting infrastructure is based on the repertoire that composers wrote for public presentation, large public gatherings. And in some cases, this was very true throughout the opera history. You go there to show your faces. This is the biggest public gathering event of a particular region. So now, of course, it's not going to be the same. And I think technology will always, look to the evolution of time, the passing of time to catch up. Technologies are, again, for our field, it's just not there. It's just not there. But composers have not changed. And so I'm a composer and I'm biased. I happen to think that as much as there are very few of us who are visible, who are the celebrity and the stars in our field, we are the reason we're going to be vital for how our field and our art form is not just going to survive, but is going to thrive into the future. That power is in the hands of composers, and along with the collaboration that happens around composers. It just so happened that right now there's a huge emphasis on the composers who are not living, and but things are beginning to change. just in this last 20 years where my career has been slowly taking shape, I am already feeling how things are different for composers from 20 years ago. And believe it, this is our time. Believe it or not, as much as it looks very daunting for everybody right now, that this has been a very fertile time for composers than ever in this country. Just look at the rosters of American Composers Orchestra. I mean, just look at all the composers Joanne Falletta has presented, your guest next week. We're out there. We're out there. And what is better right now to put, because of this technology, to have composers come to the foreground and be more visible and establish the kind of connection, although it's through the screen. But yeah, what if we collaborate with soloists? What if we talk about what it's like to be a living composer of today? What kind of audience are we cultivating and planting the seeds for the return of the full productions of the world that we used to know? This is all very important work, although it might look like there's no infrastructure in our field to support this kind of work that composers, some composers are ready to do. I'm ready to do it. I'm doing it. And I, of course, I want to be able to motivate my colleagues and my students and other people. And I can tell you that I have not met a composer who's not excited about this. If you just invite them, you create a platform and you invite them. Can you talk to us? Can you talk to here's my core, patron in my organization, or here are the parents of the students in my music program, and can you come and tell us what it's like to be a living composer? What's been your challenges? What's been your triumph? And I have not met one composer who's not excited to share our journey, and being pretty accommodating to anybody who asks the questions. So I see this as taking a kind of a different direction. Instead of making the technology, kind of forcing the technology to work for a medium, for a domain that is not really this technology oriented anyway, why not just turn the technology to something, this technology, to a format, to a kind of production that this technology is good at? And namely, what's good at it? It's good at creating this kind of zero, like right now I'm looking at this screen. The screen is about 30 inches from my face. And I have good speakers, and I will feel very good about having personal and honest conversations with my audience. Why not? So the infrastructure has to be invented, obviously. But here's another tip, is that most composers are also very generous spirited. It's different from being an easy object to exploit, but most composers are very generous, and when it comes to collaborating with people who showed an interest, who sent an invitation. And so these are, I think, great untapped opportunities and resources, that this is a really interesting time to be mining, yeah, these potentials, and then it'll be a different environment for all of us a year from now or 2 years from now. And you don't know, my conversation today might have touched one person who will come back in 2 years and say, I'm gonna do the kind of work that will change and that will base on what I said or Fred said today, and then take it to another level. And then I contributed to the health of my art form. and then I would feel great. And I already feel great now that I get to say this. So thanks for letting me say this.
Connect and collaborate.
So Emily, are there more questions?
There are more questions. I think Fred answered one already in the chat. And there's two more questions left. Who are Fred and G's favorite composers? And the last one, can you share your opinion on motivation versus discipline? This is about the timer that you showed just now, G, and how they affect or reflect the work you create.
I started the last one.
Fred?
G, who are your favorite composers?
No, this time I'm gonna let you talk first.
I go in and out of affairs with a lot of different composers, but for me, a constant for some years now has been Maurice Ravel. His wealth of ideas and, oh man, the way he, not just the ideas, but the way he brings them to life, his orchestration. I just love it. And they're the big famous pieces, but there are a lot of other little pieces around the edges too of his that I just love. So Maurice Ravel is a constant for me. Since I've been hanging out with Wang Jie, I've become a big fan of Mahler. I used to feel quite put off by how long his pieces were, how long his symphonies were, how long his song cycles were. But since hanging out with G, I've taken some deep breaths and spent some time with them and have fallen in love with Mahler. I can't quite see it. Just over G's left shoulder, there's a portrait of Mahler hanging on the wall.
My right shoulder. What? My left shoulder? Oh,
Yeah,
you mean, shoulder. Oh, yeah. I don't think I can turn my camera over there.
Yeah, it's all right. So I could go through a long list, but I'll leave it at those two for the moment. Oh yeah, and just over your right shoulder is wearing sunglasses. That looks like Wolfie.
Precisely. My friend.
So it's Mozart. Who are your favorite composers?
So as you can imagine, being a composer, I get asked a lot from everybody who are my favorite composers. So I'm not sure that if I really answer the question as it is, that I would be able to be honest. And the most honest answer I can say is that in terms of favorite composer, there's only one, and that is the composer I want to be. But I'm not there yet. But I do have to say that there are pieces that are important to me. There are composers and certain pieces. I don't go by composers, because composers, being a composer, you got good days, you got bad days, you got average days. And there are plenty of average pieces coming from any of these composers that you hold on the pedestal. And so I'm very the piece oriented. So I tend to, there are composers that I think about a lot and I care about these pieces. And when I think about them, I think about these pieces that I care about. Now, most recently, I've been restudying the Tchaikovsky Fifth Symphony, the slow movement, and the Mahler 10th Symphony, the Adagio, the part that only Mahler finished, the only movement that he actually finished. So, so I would say, like, from time to time, some pieces endured time in my world, and other pieces, they fell off my radar. So I tend to orient in this way, and so that's the only honest way I can say who are my favorite composers. And I would much rather, sit down with my students, which I do, and now it's all virtual, and I just screen share, and then we look at some pieces together, and I'll share what I see that I didn't see 10 years ago. I thought I knew Tchaikovsky Fifth Symphony since I was 15 years old. I was 14 or 15 when I first heard it. I already loved it. I thought, oh, I love the piece. Of course I know the piece. No, I did not. And now I'm 40 something, I'm 40 years old, and there are stuff in there I'm hearing for the very first time. And for the very first time, I realized how brilliant and how difficult it is to write music that is so transparent, so and so simple, but it endures.
Yeah.
And that's about as hard as it gets.
Yeah.
As hard as it gets.
Well, speaking about it being hard, we'll circle back to this question. We'll make it the last one. You mentioned good days and bad days and average days. And Giovanna says, talking about the timer and creative block, can you share your opinion on motivation versus discipline and how they affect and reflect the work you create?
Fred, do you have anything to say about discipline and motivation?
Creating routines, I have found to be absolutely invaluable, and every fiber of my being rebels against it, which makes it all the more important for me. It's one thing to say something is important to me. It's another thing to create a structure in my life that lives that. And then by doing that, then I don't have to reinvent the motivation every time. By creating some structure, some discipline, or some discipline which may be in the form of structure, then I don't have to reinvent the motivation every time. Right. It's still an active struggle for me in multiple, not just in my professional life, in multiple parts of my life. That's my top of head thought. Jie?
Wow. That's some vulnerable stuff you shared. So two things come to mind. Was that Woody Allen? 80% of life is showing up, or 70%? 74%? 80% maybe. Okay. 90%. For me, it's 90% of life is showing up. But without the kind of motivation that I can live with, to show up every day at the same time every day, and yes, that's what it takes. And this is true for musicians too. You want to keep your chops up, you show up to practice, and there's no getting around to it. For composers, you want to compose, and you want to work through all the creative difficulties and challenges. You show up every day at the same time, hopefully, and you compose, put in the labor. But the motivation part, now that's the tricky part to talk about, because I've heard motivational speeches from, at least 100 or 200 very accomplished people. And sometimes it's just the person that was there at the right time, at the right moment in your life, that said something that kind of just stuck in your mind. And for me, that moment was when my teacher at the time, Richard Danielpour, and I was still kind of scared of him, intimidated by him, because he was such an extraordinary musician, and I never thought that I would measure up to half of his accomplishments. And then it was during one of our lessons, and he kind of tapped on my head, and then he's like tapped on my head, and then I shocked. I was pretty shocked, and then blah, 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 he said something I didn't hear, and then he said, and then I heard, he said, "Gee, Jenny," and he calls me Jenny. He's like, if you learn to keep your eyes on the ball, if you could keep your eyes on the ball, everything else will sort of fall into place, and you just have to trust it. That's all you have to do, is to keep your eyes on the ball. And so that I'm paraphrasing. He said it very elegantly. But then, what a wonderful motivation at the time. I can call it motivation now because I live it. I live it, and that motivation is like a snowball. And so I would say the most dangerous thing about motivation is that somehow what didn't work for me was when motivation method coming from everywhere, and they're kind of contradictory with each other. You know, one person would say, this is what motivates me. Another person would say, oh, that is what motivates me. You know what? That's all out of our control. Which person shows up in your life in what moment is going to say something that kind of just hit you to the core? That's out of your control. But what do you got to do? You got to show up. I showed up to my lesson. I showed up on time. I did exactly what he asked me to do, although I didn't want to. And then boom, I showed up one day. The motivation that kept me going and will keep me going for as long as I live. Boom, it just happened in this very kind of ordinary moment in my lesson. So you got to show up.
Yeah.
Disciplined, show up.
Just one quick follow-up thought that I find that really inspirational, G. When I started doing radio work, I was a college student, and there was a college-run radio station, Oregon State University, KBVR, Oregon State Beavers. And I thought, I'm never going to be able to do this because I'm late to everything. And a radio show starts at 8 p.m. If you're not there, there's nothing on the air. And that was the first kick in the pants for me to show up and show up on time. And it was kind of forced on me because I liked the idea of doing radio. I didn't know anything about it. Show up and show up on time, and keep your eye on that ball. Everything else falls in place. Gee, I've never heard you tell that story. That's going to stick with me. Thank you.
It's going to stick with all of us. Thank you so much for today. Good luck with the show. Good luck with composing.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure meeting you. And thanks everybody for your questions. Thank you, Emily, for helping moderate. And thank you to Dr. Jutras for introducing us. And everybody have a great afternoon.
Dr. Jutras, Emily, Mark, thank you, everybody. I saw some great stuff going by in chat about collaborations, response to what Xi had to say about collaborations, and the richness of Athens as a musical community and the possibility of collaborations there. And absolutely, and once again, Mark Mobley is a great resource for that too.
Oh. Thank
you, everybody. This has been fantastic. I had a wonderful time. Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll let the host sign us off. Thank you.